I want to thank all of you for staying late and obviously clearly putting some diligence into this. March 18th of 2021, almost a year after the city of Atlanta almost burned to the ground, a young officer from Illinois went to school in Alabama, an Eagle Scout from one of the only Black Boy Scout troops in Illinois, with role models growing up who were law enforcement officers, came to the city of Atlanta to be a cop. I want you to sit and think for a second. And if you're honest, part of your brain is going, why in the world would anybody do that? Why would anybody subject themselves to second guessing, being spit at, cursed at, seeing the worst that society has to offer in a city that almost destroyed 6 law enforcement officers' reputations and jailed them unlawfully less than a year before? He did it because he had a heart for service. He's not a monster. He's not a person who set out on this day to injure anybody. He is a smart guy who knows exactly what the policies say. And when he got to the scene, the first thing that he saw was Mr. Holman, who's yelling, upset, won't calm down. Why are you yelling at me? Other people on the scene didn't have a problem. They've got involved in a wreck. Got the information. He looked at it. And I want you to listen to the video, because this notion that Mr. Holman just didn't agree and was somehow asserting his right to disagree, they forget to tell you that at the outset, Officer Kimbrough said, I watched the video of the wreck. I know what happened. And in the opening statement, the city attorney said, without giving Mr. Holman an opportunity to understand what was going on. Not true. Mr. Holman was not given an opportunity to sign the citation. Not true. 17 months after this occurred, you have not heard one iota of medical evidence that Mr. Holman's death had any connection with the decision to detain him and wait later for a supervisor to get there. Nothing. What you're hearing is he died, so there's got to be a problem and he's got to be punished. Well, first of all, there has to be a violation for this board to do anything. And what you've heard is he warned Mr. Holman. He told Mr. Holman he would be arrested if he didn't sign the ticket, which is what he's required to do. He told Mr. Holman that this was not an admission of guilt multiple times. Mr. Holman clearly was either not listening or had an altered mental status due to some sort of process going on. Listen to the tape. This is not an admission of guilt. Mr. Holman turns around, well, what do you want? You trying to get me to say I'm guilty? That's the reality of what Kiran, and it's Kiran Kimbrough. That's the reality of what he was dealing with. Not something in a comfy office in Atlanta Police Headquarters on a dark street at 2 a.m, dealing with multiple people on the road, with a man who is escalating. People are afraid of him, and now he is refusing to sign a ticket. And what's really interesting, 2 points that are just mind-boggling. Number one, they're telling you they terminated him because somehow this failure to follow a policy and call a supervisor led to Mr. Holman's death. Well, that's so critical that it caused his death that they exonerated him of every use of force allegation against him. I want you to sit and think a second. He threw him to the ground. He used force. He was punched. He used a taser. He threatened to use the taser. He ordered Mr. Holman to the ground. He pushed him to the ground. All of that was exonerated. We have no problems with what he did. How many times did the city attorney jump up and down when anybody tried to remind you of the fact that he was exonerated on the use of force? How do you say he's exonerated on use of force, but we have to fire him because someone died and because it caused his death? Not calling a supervisor prior to a detention didn't cause anybody to die. That is a logical, asinine inconsistency. And I've been listening to it for 17 months. I have watched this young officer go through death threats, have to move, have his family have death threats because everybody wanted someone to blame. The 7 officers who failed to render aid, who were found to have violated the policy, that was reversed by Chief Tyus. And Chief Tyus, who told this officer, you're fine, you're good, I've seen the video, and you're good, knowing that Mr. Holman died, suddenly makes a reversal. Here's another very interesting critical point for you. The whole gravamen of this policy is that he failed to call a supervisor. And none of the 2 witness deputy chief could tell you where the supervisors were. They don't even know how many supervisors were working that night. I spent a lot of time in patrol cars. You know, one thing you do know is how many supervisors are around and where they are. And are they tied up? Are they across town? You know exactly how long it'll take them to respond. Chief Tyus, how many supervisors were on duty? Not sure. Chief Shearbaum, I don't know. I'd have to check the logs. Isn't that a critical point? If this young officer recognized that this call has already been holding, that people are saying this guy's threatening me, that he's acting unreasonably and putting people in danger, and then he knows he has 1 lieutenant working and it's going to be a while for someone to get there, and he makes a decision, the guy's not going to sign the ticket, I'm going to detain him, put him in the backseat of the car for everybody's safety. Look at those cases. He can detain him, he can put him in handcuffs, he can put him in the back of a car for everyone's safety, including his own, well within his rights. That policy is crystal clear. They cannot arrest, but they can certainly detain. He did not violate the policy. And with all due respect, if he didn't violate the policy, you have no choice other than to reverse and grant him his back pay. That is the purpose of this board. And I saw that you listened very, very carefully to this evidence. And I want to go back to one of the chairman's questions early on. This notion that the chief can change his determination. We've heard it 100 times. Okay, the chief can make a determination. Based on what? Look at the evidence that you saw. And it's evidence. It's not somebody's opinion. The evidence that was deduced from professional investigators that led to their decision to be exonerated on use of force and not sustained on the policy he was ultimately terminated for. And the chairman asked a very interesting question of the chief, and I believe you asked it of the deputy chief as well. Where is your documentation? Where is your written explanation of why you went against that? It's called arbitrary and capricious. It's called pulling things out of whole cloth. It's called the media is crawling all over us. Somebody's got to pay for the fact that we're getting beaten up in the press. I hate that. I hate saying it. But one thing that you will hear very clearly, and you can watch that video again, when I went through the facts of the case, there was a correlation between the policy violation and the outcome, and nobody has shown you a single correlation with Mr. Holman's death and the failure to call a supervisor before he detained Mr. Holman. This has been called a critical directive. In fact, it's so critical, nobody's ever been terminated for it before. OPS based their terminations on evidence. And we were warned, don't pay attention to that state law thing. Oh, and by the way, there's a lot of stuff that's distracting. Don't pay attention to the gun that was in the car or the drugs that were in the car. Oh, his grandson claimed, Chief Chai is very quick. Oh, no, his grandson claimed the car. Did he claim the drugs too? I bet you he didn't. Oh, no, it's irrelevant that this man had a history of domestic violence and assaulting people, including uniformed police officers. A law enforcement officer ought to be able to walk up to someone and say, "Sir, calm down. It's a traffic wreck. Don't mix with people. Don't get angry. Calm down. Stop yelling at people." And when they fail to do that, it's disorderly conduct. He probably could have arrested him. But he clearly, on those cases I gave you, that's 70 years of case law I provided you. He can detain him for his safety and everyone else's safety. He can use force to do it. He can put him in handcuffs. And there's one thing that Mr. Holman cannot do. And nobody seems to want to talk about it. When the officer says, "Sir, I'm going to detain you, put your hands behind your back," do you know what he lawfully can do? Comply. That's it. He can't struggle. He can't fight. He can't punch the officer in the face and break his lip open. Can't do any of that. Mr. Holman would be alive if he complied with the lawful orders of a law enforcement officer. And I'm glad you're giving us an opportunity, because the mountain of information I'm going to give you on the fact that tasers do not cause someone to die like this will probably be overwhelming for you, and I will try to pare it down. The application of the taser was 1 second. When you hear on the video and you hear the multiple taser warnings, look back at the OPS warning, the OPS investigation. Those were warnings. Those are called ARCs. If you don't comply, I'm going to push the taser onto you. Those are not taser applications. 1 second on the back of the left arm. The cart's before the horse. The city has to prove a violation to start with before they can say the outcome was terrible, so we're going to increase the penalty for the violation. There is no tragic outcome exception in this policy. Well, yeah, it's not a violation, but yeah, something bad happened, so someone's going to have a problem. He wasn't fired for excessive force. He wasn't fired for being rude. He was fired for detaining someone while he was waiting for a supervisor to get there. And this notion that he never called for a supervisor, listen, I mean, it's amazing. Right after he goes down on the ground, right after he gets him into custody, he said, "Radio, I need a supervisor for a use of force and start Grady." The only person who made an effort to get medical treatment for Mr. Holman was fired. 7 officers who did not, Chief Tyus exonerated. This is a travesty. This is exactly why people are not going into police work. And this young officer deserves to be put back on the street, deserves to be reinstated with his back pay, and never deserve to be treated like this. That's exactly what I'm asking you to do.